So hello everyone, greetings. This is Rain1290. We're starting a new video series for weather forecasting in terms of thunderstorm risks for the southern southwest Quebec region and closely surrounding areas. So don't worry if you don't live in southern or southwest Quebec. There will be applications for closely surrounding regions as well. So the idea would be to provide forecasts that go beyond what you would see in mainstream forecasts with respect to thunderstorms and try to better understand the hazards behind them and what we can expect in terms of distributions. So I think it's something that could be very interesting going forward, just to add context to what's being distributed out there already, or may not be already. So the idea is to be able to stay ahead of the game and try to provide these insider details. So if this is something of interest to you, I would invite you to subscribe to not miss out on upcoming videos because, as I mentioned, these are the types of videos that I will be investing more time in going forward, on top of the usual thunderstorm content that I provide from the Montreal area, the West Island Montreal area, and more recently from Florida. So yes, there would be some thunderstorm risk, nothing major, but there would be a thunderstorm risk nonetheless for southern southwest Quebec, upstate New York, eastern Ontario, for late this evening into early pre-dawn. So May 30th going into May 31st. So we're going to do a bit of an investigation as to why and try to uncover and make sense of the environment. So we're going to start with our synoptic scale features. So see that these sorts of charts represent high pressure systems, low pressure systems, warm fronts, cold fronts. So cold fronts are generally represented by these blue spiky lines. Warm fronts are represented by these red semicircled kind of lines. And we see this cold front that's taking form here and is moving towards the southeast. So that's pretty much the pathway that this cold front will follow, and it will be the principal lifting mechanism for isolated thunderstorms. Some kind of assessment for the strength of that cold front. So one way to do that is by looking at moisture convergence at the surface. So that's what this is, surface moisture convergence. You don't need to know the unit so much, but just know that this is a measure or some sort of assessment to determine how strong that cold front is. So as we go further in time, so the brighter colors are really what you should focus on, like the yellows, the oranges, or amber, or reds even, and beyond. So as we go further in time, so this is going into the evening of today, May 30th, around 8 p.m., and now this is 11 p.m. and going into pre-dawn. So as we go into pre-dawn, you start seeing these brighter colors emerging along and ahead of that cold front as it starts to drift farther south. So in and around the island of Montreal and eastern Ontario and going northeast towards Trois-Rivières, you're seeing that maximized lift or convergence in this case. So this will keep the thunderstorm risk alive going into the late evening and into early overnight. So early pre-dawn of May 31st. Okay, so this is pretty much showing us average cloud cover for today. And as we go forward in time, so pretty much anything in white represents cloud cover, and anything outside of that represents clear breaks. So as we go forward, you can actually see those breaks emerging by late this morning, as we saw, and going into the afternoon period. You see all these discontinuities in the cloud deck, so that represents um, solar heating or sunshine getting through. So that'll maximize instability, and this will go straight into the evening period. Okay, so building upon the idea of more sunny breaks or more solar heating tomorrow afternoon, later morning into the afternoon, this will help to maximize, as I mentioned, instability. So one way to look at that instability factor is by looking at this thing called low-level lapse rates. It's just a pretty much a fancy way of saying how quickly temperature is decreasing with increasing altitude. So the brighter colors represent steeper decreases in temperature with increasing altitude. So going into tomorrow, so I'm going farther in time here. So this is for May 30th. We're actually seeing brighter colors emerge into southern Quebec, which represents steeper cooling rates with increasing altitude. So we're seeing that overspread pretty much the northeast, southern Quebec, eastern Ontario as well. So that is actually a good sign. I mean, it's good if you were hoping to see thunderstorms, but yeah, so we can see that solar heating is actually very prominent in these regions and it's helping to steepen these lapse rates. Okay, so switching gears to mid-level lapse rates. So it's pretty much the same as low-level lapse rates, except we're focusing more on mid-altitudes um, where we're evaluating temperature decreases with increasing altitude. So As we go forward in time, so these gray to green colors represent steeper cooling rates at mid-altitudes. So as we go further in time, late this evening, so this is progged for 11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and you can see the zone of steep cooling is trying to overspread southern Quebec and eastern Ontario during the late evening period and to a lesser degree overnight, but especially for the late evening period. So this will also add to the instability despite the loss of the sun at this point. Okay, so just to sort of consolidate everything we talked about, this is, you don't need to know really what this is unless, if there's enough interest, I can create a video devoted to how to read this, how to interpret it, what it represents, etc. But really what I want to draw your attention to are these forked looking symbols. This is for wind speed and direction and how they're changing from the surface down here. So pretty much like how they're changing from the surface, which is about there, and with increasing altitude. So we're not really seeing all that much in terms of changes in wind speed and changes in direction. So we pretty much have this unidirectional shearing profile. And even farther up as well, you see that non-existent change in direction. When we see this sort of orientation, thunderstorm organization is not particularly strong. But just looking at this, I don't expect thunderstorms to be particularly strong or severe, nor do I expect them to be long-lasting. Okay, so putting this all together, this wealth of information, first, I expect thunderstorm behavior to be isolated in coverage, so very sparsely distributed thunderstorms. This is mostly because the cold front's lift is not particularly strong to guide scattered to widespread coverage. For the same reasons, in addition to weak wind shear, as I showed previously in that sounding profile, I expect these to be non-severe thunderstorms, nothing strong to severe. The thunderstorms also should be slow moving and briefly sustained, so nothing long lasting, and thunderstorms would be moving almost at a snail's pace, but in general slow moving. So the hazards would be largely occasional lightning frequency. There is some window of opportunity for small hail, and mostly I think the dominant factor would be the locally heavy rainfall. And the timing would be late this evening into the overnight period, so May 30th to May 31st. Okay, so given the area of maximized lift along that cold front as it starts to evacuate towards the southeast, I expect thunderstorms to fire up in, generally isolated fashion, as I mentioned, and well, this corridor here. So for late this evening into the early overnight. So putting all that information together, and remember they'll also be traveling somewhat in this direction at a very slow speed. So if you made it this far, thank you very much for your undivided attention. I really appreciate it. I will be going forward with newer videos like this one, not just for forecasting, but for the usual thunderstorm videos from Montreal and Florida. So if these are videos of interest to you, be sure to subscribe to not miss out on those videos and so that you'll also be notified. In the meantime, feel free to check out these two playlists. They do contain highlights from particularly strong thunderstorms from both Florida and Montreal, so be sure to check those out. And until then, I will see you in the next video. So once again, thank you very much, and cheers.